Hi, everyone. Welcome to Two Bald Guys Talking Safety. I'm Langdon DeMint,
And I'm Julian Taylor.
and welcome to our podcast. Welcome back to Two Bald Guys Talking Safety. You can now join us for part 2 with Dee Arp as we get into discussing more around psychological safety and how that can help your organizations.
It's a great word, isn't it, Langdon? Vulnerability. We did some leadership training last year, and we talked. One of the great books we read was Five Dysfunctions of a Team, and it was talking about how you sort of then rebuild that team, and the base layer is trust. And you don't get trust without vulnerability. The two things absolutely go hand in hand. And too many leaders think they've got to be seen to be infallible, and actually it has the opposite effect. If the people don't trust them, and they certainly don't trust them to have conversations with them, which you're talking about. And what you were talking about there, Dee, which was the how are you? Are you all right? Those questions are just 99% of people are going to give the easy answer. So what you've got to do is create the environment where people will give the difficult answer. And that only comes through vulnerability and through trust. And I love what you're saying about it's visibility, isn't it, as a leader? And they talk about visible felt leadership. It's that visibility and being out there. So actually people can talk to you.
Absolutely, it's that physical visibility, and it's the visibility in every thread of the organization as well. Yeah, physical visibility, absolutely, but it's that it's showing up within the culture of the organization that, and it takes time to achieve, but that trust as well comes when everybody feels valued. They feel that, yeah, it's worth me not taking the easy answer because I know actually I'm going to be listened to. And not only am I going to be listened to, but I'm going to get feedback, and my opinion matters.
So one of the things, when you were talking earlier, and I was thinking, actually, one of the things that is missing often from health and safety training is actually that influencing ability, so that we can start to influence senior leadership and start to coach senior leadership around actually thinking about what do you do on a day-to-day basis. So when you rock up on site for a meeting, what do you do? Do you go straight into the meeting room, or do you actually go and walk around the site first and go and maybe talk to people? Because it's even those little things that start to make the difference.
And make sure they're aligned, even if they're the ones that are the frontline worker. Just sorry to interject right quick, but even I've worked with some where you had leadership that were kind of, I'm not going to say flippant, but maybe it wasn't as large of a focus. And you had frontline workers where they'd had previous organizational leadership where they were safety mattered. So then you try to figure out how can you align so that the leadership will listen to everything that they have implemented in practice and basically shrink that or bridge that river. So I think it's both of those. Sorry, Dee.
No, it's a great point. I was just going to say as well, everybody's so busy these days, and leaders particularly, and that scenario described, Jules, is classic, isn't it? They know they've got to rock up on site and do this site visit or the safety tour, and they're straight into that meeting because they're mindful that they've got to be A, B, and C next. And again, it's another favorite quote of mine. The greatest gift we can give each other is our presence.
Yeah.
And yet, so often, and I include myself as well, I remind myself of that, we're not present because we're thinking about the meeting we've just come out of, and oh crikey, I forgot to say that, or that didn't go so well, or we're thinking about the next meeting or the presentation next week, and we're not in the moment, and we're not present. And if somebody's got a safety concern, or they're worried about something, and they see that your mind's somewhere else, like you say, the easy answer will come and not the ground truth.
Particularly around mental health as well, Dee. If somebody's struggling mentally and they see you're not even focused on them when you're in a conversation, you probably miss out on that chance where they might reach out for some help.
Yeah, absolutely, because there are so many facets to mental health, but yeah, it's back to that training again, and like the influencing and widening the skills. I mean, I remember an example where an individual in an organization was found via an informal route to be self-harming, and part of the contributory factors to that for the individual was not feeling not feeling valued, not feeling that they were able to, contribute to the organisation. And the manager, with all good intentions, took work away, thinking that that was helping, but not understanding that whole person and what was contributing to the problem that actually added to the problem. So it's a bit like your example of, people don't turn up to work to get injured. Most managers and leaders don't intend to harm people either, but sometimes it's the lack of the skills or the the awareness that.
And then figuring out how do we have those conversations with differing of generations. I mean, it's a challenge when I think COVID exacerbated it, but it seems like, but there's a totally different approach to a younger worker than there is an older worker in a lot of times.
It is. I was having that conversation with another colleague earlier. We've got like 4 or 5 generations in a lot of organizations now, and the difference. Again, speaking to somebody last week, a younger person that had just gone in and set the stall out for what they wanted from the job and how much annual leave they wanted, and if they weren't going to get that. So really, really great to hear, but that's not equal through all the generations, for sure.
I was out running earlier, and I was actually listening to a podcast as I was running, and it was actually about Formula One of all things, but it just really triggered something that I thought was really interesting, because they were talking about the rookie drivers, because there are a lot of rookie drivers in Formula One this year, and one of them has just got sacked in effect after two races, so lost his seat after 2 races and been demoted to a more junior team. And they were making a point, which is actually this kid's only probably 21, and actually saying people's brains aren't even fully formed until they're probably 25. So what have you now done to that individual in terms of his outlook on life and his mental health? Because you've taken this action, very public action. And again, it's something for us to be considering as employers, isn't it? We don't even think about factors like that actually people are still forming themselves, aren't they? And the things that we do, the way that we treat them, will then probably define the way they're going to behave for many years to come.
Yeah, that's particularly, like you say, at those younger years, if that's how they think the workplaces are going to be every time they step into them, for sure.
And I don't know that we go through resilience the same way. I think about my grandparents' generation. Both of my grandfathers were in World War II. One of them was D-Day invasion, first wave, Utah Beach. And you go through and you think about, fair to say, one of the greatest generations of all times. They're different than my parents' generations, who are still tough, versus my generation, versus honestly the generation that we see right now. And I think about my young children. It's a challenge, because you have all these differing generational, maybe, suppositions and expectations. When as soon as I graduated my master's, when I interviewed with the organizations, you ask different questions. Well, how do you view health and safety? How is it, things like that. But so I would like 28 days off, please. I mean, like, as soon as you get an offer, thank you. Yeah, yes, I will take it. How many days do I get off? And that's a different, when you think
Yeah.
about it, and I'm hopefully that's on the positive side, where I think for the younger generation, they can play a powerful impact in the workplace, because the psych safety that you were discussing, certain aspects of you will versus will you, or just that openness of saying what they see. I do think the younger generation is a powerful tool that can be more open to doing that. And then getting Jimmy, who's been doing the job for 40 years, and just, that's the way it is. It doesn't have to be that way. So there is a bridge. Is that anything that you're working with from that perspective as well, Dee, that you're seeing also?
Absolutely. I think, we've seen a lot more training now about understanding the different generations and some of those examples that you gave. And it's all part of that people at the heart of everything. It's understanding the people we've now got in workplaces and that whole range of different generational approaches. But it embraces equity, diversity, inclusion as well, because on your positive, Langdon, you get that range of views and perspectives. It just makes us better. it just gives us more chance of touching on, what could go wrong and how we're going to fix it. It just makes us better if we just harness it and embrace it and make people feel safe. Everybody's got a view. There'll be something from Jimmy that's been doing it 40 years that's still of huge value, and something new we can learn from the 21-year-old for sure.
We can almost get blind to opportunities, can't we? Because we've always done it this way. And I think again, the 5 dysfunctions of a team sort of bring out this point, which is different opinions can be incredibly valuable, but you've got to create an environment where they're allowed to come out. I mean, that book talks about creating conflict miners, doesn't it, Langdon, in meetings? So actually, people who are there not to drive negative conflict, but to introduce
Disrupt
conflicting,
it.
disrupt,
Yeah.
just disrupting with different ideas, which I thought was great. I was going to say, Dee, as well, in terms of practicalities, coaching the sort of senior leadership team, what are some of the sort of bits of advice you've got then when it comes to saying, right, how do we change the behaviours of the leaders within our business? How do we start to drive more genuine reactions from them?
I think the first thing is stepping in their shoes. I think if the OSH profession can do that and understand, their challenges and what they're dealing with, because sometimes we're so passionate with our detail and using the OSH language, and there isn't the time or the space for some leaders to go into that, or they just don't buy into the opportunities from that dialogue. So I think, some general tips would be understanding the strategy of the organization you're working for. What's the mission and vision? What's the 3-year, 5-year strategy wherever they are? What's the business plan for the coming year? What's the KPIs for the leaders? Because if what you're proposing doesn't fit into any of that, it makes it less likely that they'll embrace it. But if you can make your proposals fit in with where the organization is already on the journey to, that can be super helpful. And I think get to know the individuals. That's probably a whole other podcast, but get to know what power type they are. Yeah, I mean, if you've got somebody who is a knowledge power type, then give them lots of detail and information. But work out where your people are, that the inspirational leaders, and get them on side. Get to know your finance person, and how how they like the numbers and the metrics presented to show that there's return on investment. So I think really just getting into C-suite language and understanding their challenges and seeing how your health and safety projects and requirements can actually fit into that, rather than sometimes it being perceived perhaps by them sometimes that it's another additional thing.
Yeah, and again, Langdon, that's a great thing that our CEO talks about. Is he doesn't we've sort of banished the term safety culture from the podcast because it's this separate thing. It's just culture. And Matthew talks about safe operations, which we really like, which is just it's one thing. It's operations, but we're going to do them safely. But like you say, it's the classic, isn't it? What's in it for me? Even for C-suite, it's what's in it for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because they've got so many other challenges. They've got boards to, to give assurance to. And, again, this was another discussion yesterday about, where does finance sit with health and safety? Well, the OSH professionals say, well, finance comes second, but, businesses have to survive. If they don't survive, they can't pay people, and then we haven't got people at the heart of anything. So that's what we've got to marry up. Your point earlier, Jules, about looking after people actually generates that resilience and performance that the leaders are looking for. So that's the argument we've got to present and show with some real tangibles.
The other thing I was going to pick up on as well, because the reason you're here, Dee, is because I met you at the safety show in Manchester and listened to you present there, and there's some great stuff that you were talking about. One of the things was the 4 stages of psychological safety, which I thought was interesting. So I was wondering if you wanted to sort of talk through that for me.
Yeah, this is in a book, actually. I've got to give credit to the author, and I'm just checking here. Timothy R. Clark, who's founder and CEO of Leader Factor. And this is what I love. I mean, there's so many models out there, and it's always about finding the one that works for you and your organization. But the stages he talks about were just really accessible and clear. And it was about understanding that river quote that this is a changeable thing. People change, the environment changes. You can't ever stop and say, right, tick, we've got psychological safety. You've got keep working at it. But the first stage was about inclusion safety. So you're not going to get people speaking up and asking questions and challenging until people actually feel they're valued, and that trust is there that you were both talking about earlier. So they've got to feel that they are actually a valued member of the team. And it's only when you've got that stage that people will then go on to the learner safety stage, where they will start asking questions. So it's like, great, I now feel confident to be part of this team. I want to learn more. I'm curious. I can ask questions. So you've got your learner safety. When they're confident that they've learned enough about the team and where the organization is going, they then feel confident to contribute. Yeah, so now I'm not just asking questions. I feel so secure in this team that I can offer some suggestions and know that I will be heard and valued. And then the fourth stage is when people are truly gelling as a team. You've got that trust, you've got a great culture, they feel able to challenge. Yeah, and that's when you're really going to get psychological safety, but you're going to get innovation and creativity as well. And again, going back to the leader piece, so often leaders are not challenged because they're giving off the message that I know everything, I'm in charge of everything. But equally, I talk to some leaders where they say they love it when people in their organisation says, "No, just a minute, I think that could be better," or "I've got this great idea." Yeah, so it's inclusion safety, learner safety, contributor safety, and then challenger safety. So when you've got people challenging each other, you've really got that safe space.
You could almost align that to the maturity scale, couldn't you, Langdon?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, actually.
See, we're just
I'm telling you,
tied in
Joining the dots, joining the dots.
Yeah.
But that's what I love. It is about that golden thread, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think sometimes we've got models and structures and different roles, and we just need to see how we can better fit that all together. It's like all the jigsaw pieces are there in organisations. We've just got to fit them together.
And that's what safety is, isn't it? It's a great big jigsaw puzzle. And like you say, it's putting all the pieces together so you sort of get that overall picture. But I love the bit you got to at the end, which was the challenger safety, because with that you start to see innovation, you start to see new ideas, and it's not just restricted again to safety, is it? It's new ideas about how they can run a better process or be more efficient. It generally makes people better people.
And then it's the reverse of it. It's the same pebble in the pond, but in a good way. That ideas going in, and then it encourages other people to bring their thoughts and ideas to the table as well.
I've got one other question for you, Dee, as well, because I have this bit of a bee in a bonnet, which is the term psychological safety can scare people off. It sounds like this, so I suppose, very academic thing. If we're going to rename it, what could we call it, or what actually is psychological safety?
Yeah, again, whenever I'm talking about a subject, I like to unpack the term for the very reason that you've said. And when I started doing that for psychological safety, it was interesting because I just looked at the word safety initially, and you go back to its Latin origins, which I think is salvus. And it's really interesting because at that point, the word safety included being uninjured, being unharmed, being healthy, being safe. That's interesting because now we've got all these additional terms. We've got healthy, safety, well-being, psychological safety. But yeah, safety just was that being safe, being unharmed, being healthy, being uninjured. As soon as you bring the psychological bit in, that's when it can get scary because we're then talking about people's feelings and emotions and the mental health piece. So yeah, it's a great question to think of a simpler term. But when you unpack that, it just means people feel valued. That there was a quote that I'm trying to remember. There was a really early example. I'll try and find it before we finish. But it was about people feeling worthy. That was one of the origins before the term psychological safety. It was about being worthy. So yeah, so for me, it's about people feeling part of that culture, part of the organisation, feeling valued, feeling that they can bring their whole self, their true self to work because that trust is there. And they can just speak up. And when you look at so many terrible incidents that have happened over the years, people have either been, afraid to speak up because that culture wasn't there, or in some cases where organisations were working on, it's okay to speak up, they've spoken up and weren't listened to or responded to. So it's got to be that loop, you feel so valued that you speak up and you're heard and responded to. But no, I think on that we need a different term for psychological safety.
We'll have to come up with, that's our challenge for this year, is come up with a better term. But again, it's almost that feeling mentally safe to do something, isn't it? Yeah, and I mean the question we ask all the time, and we've asked it lots of times when we've been presenting, is how many times have you seen the job stopped in the last 12 months because somebody's got or raised a safety concern? And very, very few hands ever go up when you ask that question. And that sort of tells us that's why there's this sort of really urgent need to focus on this, isn't it? Because that, you talk about the challenger piece, that's the bit we need, and it's missing because people don't feel able to say stop.
And you look at some of the worst case scenarios where that happened, contributed factor on Piper Alpha, where they kept pumping because they were afraid of all the dollars that would be lost if they stopped. I found the original quote. It was 1954 by Carl Rogers, and he described it as, it's establishing conditions where an individual feels they possess unconditional worth.
Wow, I love that.
It's great, isn't it? That was 1954 as well. And that's the other thing about all these things, they're not new. People talk about, soft, fluffy stuff. It's not new.
It's funny because the thing I talk about all the time, Dee, is Heinrich's triangle. And I say, take the numbers out, forget the numbers, don't get tied up in the semantics of whether 30,000 will lead to 1 or whatever. The principle is just really simple here. If you can get people to tell you about the stuff at the bottom, we stop the stuff at the top. That's the principle.
Absolutely.
And that goes back to 1936. And in 2025, we still can't do it.
If we flip it also and look at it and think that's something we push, is start when safe and prepared. And so many, you think you're starting when you're ready, but if you actually start work at the beginning of the morning or the evening, whenever your shift or however it goes, but if you start when you understand the job, when you're prepared, you have all the PPE needed, you've gone through your assessments, you feel mentally ready, prepared to do it, then you also, especially if everything has been taken into consideration, if the stop work should come, you would even feel more comfortable raising that hand. So it is that whole people aspect and understanding start versus stop, and how both of those are integrated together.
And that's what psychological safety is. It's not a short, neat term for it to replace psychological safety, but it is about people being able to express themselves, speak the truth without that fear of anything negative happening. And that's often what stops people, because they don't feel valued, or even worse, they feel if they do speak up, there'll be a negative consequence in some way or form.
It's interesting because we talked to Jason Anker recently, and he was
Oh,
talking
I love
about,
Jason.
and he was talking about the stuff that was going on outside of the workplace before his accident happened. And again, I was just thinking about that as you talked there, Langdon, about the sort of the safe start piece. Are we mentally safe to start work today? How many businesses ever think about that? We might have a checklist, but do we actually look at the individual and say, is that individual, it's good to be on site today?
Yeah, and that's got to be encompassing that whole person and what's going on in work, at home, in the communities.
Dee, I'm sure we could go on talking forever. We are sadly running out of time. I have had a brainwave though, Langdon. I think we should get Dee and Karen back on together, and we'll do an episode with the two of them together. That sounds like a plan.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah. It might be a double episode because I think there would be quite a lot of talking going on, but it'd be great.
Too much to say.
Yeah, but it's good stuff. That's been a fascinating conversation, Dee. I knew it would be because I loved what you had to say when I saw you in Manchester. So we will definitely get you back again to do another episode.
Thank you both. It's great. Great hearing your passions as well. And thank you for the opportunity to be with you today.
Cool. So thanks for coming on, Langdon. You're you're the king of the outro, so I'm going to let you wrap it up for us.
Thanks, Jules, and thanks, Dee, once again for joining us. And listeners, for all of you out there, while you're going about your days, as you're going about your work days at home, if it's on the weekend maybe, just remember to look out for one another. Remember to try to do your best to stay healthy, stay safe, and ultimately watch each other's back out there. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Two Bald Guys Talking Safety. Don't forget to follow and subscribe wherever you stream your podcast, or you can visit us at evotix.com.
And if you've liked today's podcast or you found some value from it, we'd really appreciate it if you could head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review or a rating. It really means a lot to us. Thank you.